Welcome to On the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. And for the first time, we are coming to you live. I'll have Bob explain how we're doing that here in a little bit. But a quick rundown on today's show, we're going to have our spring training predictions. As you know, we love to make predictions on this show. And this is going to be the episode where we're going to predict some of the storylines that are going to be unfolding in camp, how the roster is going to shake out for opening day, and some of the key position battles. So that'll be on this episode of On the Verge, which, as you know, is brought to you by Mercer Floor and Home Carpet One. Mercer is a third-generation family business. It was established in 1959 and is located on Main Street in beautiful, historic downtown Westminster, Maryland. For all of your flooring needs, think Mercer. So as I mentioned, we are actually live streaming this show tonight, although it will be available as an episode on your normal podcast platforms after we're finished recording, so you'll be able to go back and listen to it over the coming days. So, Bob, kind of give us a quick rundown on how we're doing this.
Yeah, it's all thanks to Josh Soroka, the mastermind behind Section 336 and Birdland Tonight. And he is letting us take over the Birdland Tonight live stream so that we can advertise Birdland Tonight as well as our podcast. So thanks, Josh.
Yeah, thank you, Josh, for setting us up with this. And a quick note. Some of you may have noticed that last week's show had to be taken down after it was initially published because of an issue with the audio file. Fortunately, that has been fixed, and the show was back up as of last night. The file is good to go. So when you finish this show, go back and listen to last week's show and get our preview of college baseball as well as a little bit of spring training talk that we had before tonight's show. One of the things we wanted to talk about at the top of the show was that since we were last on the air, the 2021 minor league baseball schedules were announced. If you've been following what's been going on in the minor leagues this offseason, it was really not a big surprise. AAA will start in April, while Low A, High A, and Double A will begin in May. The plan right now is for AAA to have 142 games, with the Double A, High A, and Low A leagues all having 120 games. With the minor league baseball reorganization and MLB's takeover that took place over the offseason, Aberdeen is now the Orioles High A affiliate. Otherwise, Norfolk remains at AAA, Bowie at AA, Delmarva at Low A. Some of the things that are going on scheduled this year are a little bit different than what we've seen in the past because there's a more regional component to the travel, especially in Norfolk's case, as they're primarily going to play AAA teams based in the Southeast. And there will also be one day off a week. I believe there are no all-star games this year. So certainly a different look and feel to what we're used to from minor league baseball. But I think you guys can agree that we're happy to have signs of a regular season coming.
Yeah, this is awesome to finally have baseball in the air. Spent all weekend watching college baseball. If you follow us on Twitter, you would know that. Lots of college baseball clips. Yeah, I think the schedule format is actually pretty cool, which as a whole with minor league baseball, you're doing 6-game sets against teams. So if you're in Norfolk Tides, you're at home Tuesday through Sunday playing the same team. And then every Monday is going to be a travel day. I'm interested to see what the minor leaguers themselves think about this, having 4, maybe 5 off days every month instead of 1, maybe 2 off days a month, on top of the higher pay, better upgrades to these facilities. I think it's all going to be another positive step for minor league baseball. But yeah, the all-star games are kind of a bummer because that's an opportunity to see a bunch of top prospects on one field. But I think just for this year, at least getting the 120 to 140 games at each level is going to be a plus and a positive. And it looks like as far as state-by-state basis, but at least here in Virginia, we can have 1,000 people at stands. So if you're close to Norfolk or want to go to Norfolk Tides game, at least for right now, you're going to have 1,000 fans, hopefully more by the time they start in April. But it's right here on the horizon. This is awesome. Feels good.
And that's really your only option as far as minor league baseball in the Orioles system, at least until May, once the lower leagues start kicking in. But yeah, the schedule looks different than normal, but it's baseball. And if anything, I think it's kind of neat, even if it's only a one-year thing. I think a lot of teams are going to have 6-man rotations. So you're just going to basically see everyone's starting pitcher one time through the rotation on a week. And it's kind of cool. It's a little imbalanced. I think Norfolk is playing like Charlotte 48 times or something, but it's baseball. And with the way the players move up and down, it's not going to be like it's going to get too stagnant, I wouldn't believe. So, hey, it's exciting.
Yeah, it certainly is. To see the full schedules, you can head to the team websites, and then also check out at BSL on the Verge on Twitter, because I know we tweeted the schedules out last week. We're going to move in now to our predictions. And as you know, if you're a listener of this show, we love to make predictions on this show. We've had shows on here before where we've made a dozen predictions that we've outlined at the beginning of the show and then added more on before it was over. So don't be surprised if some impromptu questions come up tonight. But one of our rituals is that we do like to go back and revisit our predictions to see what we got right and what we got wrong before we make more predictions. So I was reminded recently that we had made some predictions on a show right after the 2020 regular season ended about how the 2021 season would look from a rules perspective. So I'm going to run those down now. So here's our predictions for 2021 MLB rules as made right after the 2020 season ended. Would there be a 162-game season? We all three said yes, and right now that is the plan. Will there be a universal DH? We all said yes, and there will not be a universal DH. The pitchers will bat in the National League this year. Runner on second in extra innings as to start every inning, as was implemented last year. Would that be back in 2021, and would it be used in the playoffs? We all said yes to the first part, which was that it would be back in the regular season, and no, it would not be in the playoffs, which I believe is correct. I did throw in a caveat that I wouldn't be shocked if MLB did something odd, like implemented early in the postseason or implemented after the 12th inning in postseason games. But that's probably not going to happen because there are no expanded playoffs this year. We're back to 10 teams as we were pre-2020. All three of us predicted back after the 2020 season ended that in 2021, expanded playoffs would stay, and they would likely remain at the 16-team format for 2021 before maybe moving into another number in 2022. So overall, all three of us went 2 for 4, didn't get the universal DH correct, didn't get the expanded playoffs correct, but got the schedule and the runners on second base at the beginning of extra innings part correct. I don't know about you guys. I don't want to speak for you, but I don't think what I anticipated was that the universal DH especially would become such a bargaining chip in discussions between players and owners. And I think that's really the reason why we're not seeing it this year.
First prediction of the day. We're going to have universal DH before opening day kicks off, and we're going to have expanded playoffs. I think 14 teams this time. I just feel like MLB is dragging their feet around. It just makes too much sense not to happen. I think they're going to try to use it as a bargaining chip, realize it can't really be used as a bargaining chip, and then they're going to do what works best for both parties in the end. Unfortunate for those free agents who could have gotten a better contract if they had announced it sooner, but...
Yeah, I mean, the DH thing, I don't know. I mean, we're all AL fans and grew up watching Orioles baseball, so it's natural to us. I get from the National League perspective, you know, it's real baseball. There's all the strategy involved, which, okay, like nobody wants to see the pitchers bat. I enjoyed Richard Blyer's Instagram post. I saw it, send help as he's practicing bunting. But, I mean, just, yeah, it's hurt a lot of guys in free agency, like you said, Bob. Number of players still out there without a job, and spring training is already underway. Games start in like 3-4 days. I mean, and it's going to be, even last year, after opening the first pitch of opening day, Major League Baseball is changing the rules. And I feel like it's going to be the same case this year. It's going to be whatever the league feels like makes them a little bit more money without regard to fans or players at this point. And, you know, it's fine. The runner on second rule, I will say, and I think I joined a lot of people in saying that I was against it at first. I didn't like it when it was used in the minor leagues. But at this point, I don't really care. At this, keep it, don't keep it. Doesn't bother me either way. The universal DH, let's bring this full time. Let's stop watching pitchers hit, obviously. And then, you know, yeah, we'll see what Major League Baseball does. I mean, no one's a fan of Major League Baseball. We're just glad to have baseball back.
That's right.
Yeah, I do think it's going to be interesting to see, just because, as both of you said, MLB has kind of been going last second, and I understand part of it is the pandemic. You have to be prepared to adjust with everything, but some of these things feel like they're more about the relations between the players and the owners and less about the pandemic. So I don't know. I wouldn't be shocked if MLB does make some last-minute changes or make some changes within, say, the window between now and the second week of the season, that all of a sudden you do have expanded playoffs, or you have something else thrown in that we're not anticipating right now. But at the very least, it looks like they're going to be able to pull off 162 games. Hopefully, they can do it safely. Everything else, though, we'll see how it happens. I still expect, though, that even if it's not in baseball this year, the universal DH will take full effect in 2022, and there will be no going back after that.
Yeah,
yeah, for sure.
Apparently, I'm in the minority when it comes to the 7-inning doubleheader thing. I'm just going to put it that way. I love the 7-inning doubleheader day, but I understand that not a lot of other people do, and that's fine. That's just the college. I guess that's just the college baseball fan of me.
Yeah, I didn't hate it for last season and this season even, but going forward, I'd prefer not. But it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, we'll see. I do think there's a strong argument for bringing it back this year, and this is something we're going to talk about a lot in our predictions. But it's how are you going to use your pitchers? How many pitchers are you going to have on your roster? How are you going to use them? How many innings are these guys going to be able to throw? So it does feel like it's sort of a cautionary measure. 7-inning doubleheaders for this year are a good thing, but we'll see if they stick around after this. So we'll move in now to our predictions. And basically what we're going to do is our spring training predictions. Some of these things will be prospect related. The prospect that I know everybody wants us to talk about on every show, Adley Rutzman, does factor into these predictions. But there's also some stuff about the Major League roster. And I'll get into the first one, which is how many pitchers will be in the Orioles opening day rotation and who will they be? As a bonus, can you guess the order correctly? And I'll start with Nick.
Oh man, it's going to be a mess this year, to be totally honest. I mean, with a lot of teams, especially like the Orioles, trying to figure things out, trying to get pitchers back in to shape here. And I think the Orioles have like 4 off days in the first 3 weeks. So I mean, you're going to be able to use guys for a while here, but I think they do use the 6-man rotation. I know there's some talk about it. A lot of other teams are looking at using the six arms at least to start the season. I think it makes sense, just as guys work back into the mix here. But I think that even if Matt Harvey and Felix Hernandez don't make the starting rotation, I mean, I think Mike Elias is going to be active on the waiver wire trying to find guys after rosters are set. But I think for right now, I'm going to say John Means gets the opening day nod, of course. And then I think it's going to be Dean Cramer, Felix Hernandez, Keegan Aiken, Jorge Lopez, and Matt Harvey to round it out. But like I said, a lot of days off early on. It's going to be a mess to see who gets in, who gets how many innings. But at least for right now, that's my prediction, and I'm gonna go with that 6-man.
Yeah, it's tough after the first 3 or 4. John Means definitely opening day starter, and I think he's gonna make the All-Star game again this year. That's one surprise already. Number 2, Dean Cramer. I think he's really gonna show out during spring, and this year he's going to prove that he is a mainstay in the rotation. 3, if Felix Hernandez makes the team, it's got to be probably the 3rd starter. Then you go Keegan Aiken 4, so I guess we're the same there. I'll go Matt Harvey 5 and Bruce Zimmerman 6 to start off things with the 6-man rotation. I think that'll only last a month or so, and then they'll kind of ease back into a 5-man rotation. Maybe even Bruce Zimmerman and Tyler Wells will be like a tandem for that 6th starter.
So I'm going to say that they have a 6-man rotation as well, and my order is John Means as the opening day starter, so we're unanimous there. I think Felix Hernandez makes the team as the number 2 starter, because I don't think he's the second best pitcher on the Orioles. It's not because of that, but I think it's almost sort of a nod to say this is the most accomplished pitcher in our rotation. We have younger guys behind him. We'll make Felix the number 2. Then we'll go Dean Cramer, Keegan Aiken, Jorge Lopez, who I'm not sold on as a starter, but I think the Orioles want to try him there for an extended period. And I know some people are not going to like this, but I'm going to go Wade LeBlanc in the 6th spot. Somehow I think he hangs on and he makes the back of the rotation as the other lefty. They give him a chance to see if he could shake off the injuries that he had last year. It might not last long, but I'm going to say that Wade LeBlanc is in there in the beginning.
Tommy Malone is still a free agent. We could just sign him instead.
I was waiting for Julio Teheran just because there's the Angels connection. You don't have to trade for him. You can just sign him to a minor league deal. But he went to the Tigers, and so much for that. But yeah, it's
Tigers and Orioles mirror match.
I think it's, when you're looking at this, it's all about versatility. I think guys, and I guess we'll talk more about that when we get to the Rule 5 picks. But if you have options, it's going to be a huge bonus. I think as we see a lot of pitchers shuffled in and out this year.
Yeah.
All right. So the next question on our list, I believe, was submitted by Bob.
Yeah. So my first question for you guys was going to be, who do you think will be the biggest pleasant surprise of this spring training camp, and who will be the biggest disappointment?
I will go with Jahmai Jones as the biggest surprise. I think that the fact he's coming over a little bit late, although we've talked about him on our last few episodes, it sounds like he made some real progress at the plate last year. I think that's going to carry over into camp. As I said last week, I'm really interested to see how his swing looks. While I don't know that that's going to be enough for him to make the opening day roster, I think he's going to hit well, and he's going to put himself in that position where the first opening for regular at-bats in the major leagues, he could find his way up from Norfolk. So I'm going to go Jahmai Jones as the biggest surprise. And the biggest disappointment, I know it's obvious, but it's going to be Chris Davis because he's not going to look good in camp. And then we're going to have the discussion as spring training goes along. So the Orioles just release him because someone's going to get squeezed off the roster because of Chris Davis struggling. And then Chris Davis will make the opening day roster. It's a circle of life in Orioles baseball since 2018.
My thing is, the only way that he could really disappoint is if he plays good enough to justify his spot on the roster, but we'll see. Chris Berger says Ryan McKenna for biggest surprise. That would be interesting.
That would be awesome to see. I'm going to stick with the center field and go with Austin Hayes as the biggest surprise, just because I think health-wise is obviously the biggest question mark with him. There have been struggles at the plate. He's been a streaky hitter. I just think that there's a lot of talk, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later on, but there's a lot of talk about Cedric Mullins taking over the starting job, or at least being a heavy competitor for that starting job at center field. So I think Austin Hayes has been up in the big leagues now for 3-4 years. He knows that there's a lot of competition coming up. Maybe not center field directly, but outfield as a whole is a very deep position in Baltimore. A lot of top prospects working their way up. Guys like McKenna, guys like Yusniel Diaz are banging on the door. So I think Austin Hayes has to show out. So I think I could see him getting really hot this spring, although the biggest fear is, does he try to go too hard? Because I like his intensity. His intensity is amazing, but we know that sometimes that gets him in trouble. And so is he just, stretching one single out to a double, and there goes a wrist, and then he's out for 4 or 5 weeks? That's always the biggest fear with him. If we're talking, though, Jake Fox Award winner for this spring training, I'm going Seth Mejias-Breen. Mark that down. Remember the name. Okay. I could see him hitting like 7 or 8 jacks this spring and then not making the team. But biggest disappointment, I'm going to go DJ Stewart. I just think that all of his production was in just such a small concentration of games. It's like 8 or 9 game stretch where he got 95% of his hits, and he didn't have that many hits to begin with. But other than that, I've been a big supporter of his since very early on in the minor leagues, but even through his slow starts. But I'm getting DJ Stewart fatigue here, and I'm ready to kind of move on. There's a lot of other interesting options. I mentioned McKenna. He's on the 40-man now. Diaz is on the 40-man now. So they're quick call-ups. You have Cedric Mullins there. Tyler Nevin is also on the 40-man roster, I believe. So he's a quick phone call up to the majors. Finally got a full season at AA in 2019. So he may be ready after a few weeks. But I just think there's so much competition banging at the door, and I just don't see DJ Stewart being able to stick it out. For me, he's a name on the bubble. Is he going to make that opening day roster or not?
It's a good question.
We're going to go now to a question Nick actually has on here about the outfield.
I didn't get to do my own surprise and disappointment.
Sorry, Bob.
That's okay. No, it's quite all right. It's probably not going to be that interesting anyway, but my biggest surprise is actually, this kind of goes in well with DJ Stewart conversation, is Yusniel Diaz. I think he's going to just bang on the doors all spring long and kind of make a run for being on the opening day roster, at least a case that he should be or could be. Ultimately, I don't think that's the case. I think they want to get that extra year out of him, as most teams do. Just ask Kevin Mather. But I think he's going to really put on a show in spring, hit some home runs, some doubles, show off his arm in the outfield, and DJ Stewart's going to start nervously sweating profusely. And as far as disappointment, I will say Cedric Mullins. Unfortunately, as great of a story as it was, a great comeback to kind of get back and establish himself at the major league level last year. If you look at his baseball savant page, he's pretty low in a lot of metrics other than his defense, which could keep him in the majors, and his speed. It was not a lot going on for him. I want to say he had a high BABIP. I should have confirmed that before talking about it, but I don't know. I just think he's going to kind of not crash as far as he did in 2019, but just kind of fall back down to earth as like a 680 OPS type of guy. With his defense, that could play a role in a team, but with, as Chris Barger said, with Ryan McKenna kind of being able to do some of the same things, that could also be dangerous for his spot.
Yep.
Yeah, agree. So Nick's got a question about the outfield.
Yes, we got the rotation there. The infield, I think, is pretty set in stone. I don't think there's very many questions about the infield, but with the outfield, there's been a lot of these talks. I think it was Joe Trezza even had Cedric Mullins as mentioning him as like the opening day starting center fielder. I've seen a lot more of this talk around Cedric Mullins here. And so I guess it's who is opening day, when opening day rolls around, who is going to be starting outfield for the Baltimore Orioles?
I'll say Mountcastle in left, Hayes in center, Santander in right. Pretty chalk, but I don't know unless Chris Davis gets released somehow, and then Mountcastle moves to first, or DH shares first and DH with Trey Mancini. Then maybe you give DJ Stewart or Cedric Mullins the left field job.
I'm with Bob on this one. I think that's the opening day outfield. I do think Mullins will get his fair share of plate appearances early on, but if we're looking at opening day specifically, I think that Chris Davis is in the lineup, which means that Ryan Mountcastle is in left field, and then Hayes in center, Santander in right, and then Mullins probably gets a little bit more playing time after that, but that's my guess for the opening day outfield.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think the ceiling for that outfield is pretty high, I think. But you have guys like Yusniel Diaz and Heston Kjerstad come up to push that ceiling up even higher. But with these guys right now, there are just so many questions. I think with Mountcastle is obviously still Rookie of the Year eligible, still a young guy, still going to mash the baseball. A lot of the pitchers that he's going to face this year didn't get to see him last year since you stuck to those AL East, NL East teams in 2020. So that could be to his advantage again in this sophomore, quote unquote, sophomore year. Austin Hayes, like we already talked about him, the question marks there. Santander, I know Orioles fans are in love with him. I get it. I love the guy as well, but he's only played in 176 games in 4 seasons. So I just think there are questions there. We just need to see it. He just got to prove it across the full season. Can he be consistent? Can that defense, the progression he took defensively in right field, does that stick? I think it does. But I guess then to build on that, by the end of the season, who is your starting outfield? Are those 3 guys going to stick there, or?
I think it could be Diaz in right with the Santander trade, and Hayes in center, and Mountcastle still in left.
I'm going to go Diaz in left, Hayes at the center, and Santander in right.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too. I think Santander stays in the outfield for sure. Well, yeah, Santander stays. Diaz is definitely out there. I just don't see how he makes it to the All-Star game without being on the Major League roster. And then Hayes. But it's interesting to see. We got a lot of guys coming up in this system in the outfield. And the outfield is going to be at least a fun section of the roster to watch this year.
And for probably a long time to come, too.
Yeah.
We sure hope so. So Bob now has a question about the bench.
Yeah. How many bench spots do you think will be used for position players, and who's going to fill them? I think there's a maximum of pitchers, so I'm sure the Orioles will go to that maximum line. But what do you guys think? Zach?
I'm going to go actually with what Joe Trezza has, and I think your bench is going to be Francisco, Cedric Mullins, and Pat Valleca. I think the Orioles, as you said, are going to go to the max with the pitchers. The 6-man rotation, I think, may end up squeezing a position player off. Otherwise, I may have had DJ Stewart on my bench, but my guess is that they put Stewart in Norfolk early on to get him regular at bats, and they go with Cisco, Valleca, Mullins on the bench, and then kind of alternate Mullins in and out. Cisco Severino playing time as they usually have, and Valleca will play around the field, but hopefully not a lot of shortstop.
Yeah, I think that was kind of my question with this, and it rolls into this benches. Who's going to be the Orioles utility guy this year? Is it going to be Pat Valleca again? Because I think that bench is pretty much set there. I agree with all those things. I wanted to put Ramon Urias down there instead of Pat Valleca because regular listeners of our show know my disdain for Pat Valleca. But I will say, maybe it's baseball season starting back up again, and I have a soft spot for baseball again. You have Yolmer Sanchez now. You've got Jahmai Jones in the system now, who's AAA, possibly Major League roster. You've got Freddie Galvis at shortstop. The middle infield is pretty solid, I think, and there's good depth pieces there. So I don't think we'll have to rely on Pat Valleca to play shortstop, but he can. He can play first base. He can play the outfield. He can DH. So I think if he's strictly like a DH, then he sticks around and makes this roster, because the potential in that bat, the power in that bat, it can be real. So I think Valleca does stick around. But I'm just going to throw the name Ramon Urias out there, former top 30 prospect with the Cardinals. His brother is Luis Urias, one of the top hitting prospects. He struggled since being traded to the Brewers, but the brothers can hit. So just keep that name in mind.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think you might see like a DJ Stewart, Pat Valleca platoon at DH with Chris Davis firmly planted on the bench, Chance Sisco, obviously. And I think the utility guy will be Jahmai Jones. I think his ability to play center field and second base up the middle, probably even third base, left field, I think that gives him the edge. It's not like they need to play the, service time game. He already got major league time. So I think he's going to earn the last spot on that bench.
I will say that putting Jones on the roster would just give that bench a lot more upside and a lot more athleticism than the options that I just mentioned. So I would actually be happy to see that if it worked out.
And Rylan Bannon is the emergency catcher apparently now. So, and if you have Bannon on the roster, he had a little bit of AAA experience, but if he really is this emergency catcher type player, and they've been working him out there and they continue to work him there, then you don't have to put a catcher on your taxi squad. And so you can put another pitcher there or put another bat there instead of putting in Austin Wynns or Nick Schufo or someone else in that spot. So that could be something to think about as well.
And Chris Barger, again, with a great point, agrees with you.
Yeah, I would not be surprised to see Bannon in there either. So it's definitely going to be some interesting younger guys who are more in that utility mode to watch in camp. So speaking of players who are going to make the roster, I'm going to throw out this prediction question. Will Rule 5 picks Max Soroller and or Tyler Wells make the opening day roster? I'll start with Bob.
I think one of them will. I think we've kind of been on the same track, all of us, for most of the time since the Rule 5. But I think Tyler Wells is the guy over Max Soroller. Obviously, haven't even been games played yet in spring training, so anything could shift. But I think, like I mentioned, Tyler Wells might be in a tandem with Bruce Zimmerman as my sixth man in the rotation. So I have to stick with that prediction. Nothing against Mac and or Ben McDonald. Please don't hurt me. But yeah, that's my guess.
Yeah, to put it on record, I'm going to say no, that neither does. Although Max Soroller is kind of, I've been trying to get excited about him. The bloodline is obviously exciting. That storyline, something to talk about, especially during spring training games, if we ever get any broadcast on Masson, which doesn't seem likely. But I just don't see it, just because, like I mentioned, versatility is going to be key, especially with these pitchers. It doesn't seem like anybody's going to want to really throw their guys out for 6 innings on opening day, for at least the first few weeks of the season, especially guys like Keegan Aiken and Dean Cramer probably aren't going to be able to. John Means maybe. Felix Hernandez isn't throwing 6 innings every single day, every single start. So I just think with the Rule 5 pick, you're stuck. You already have Chris Davis wasting a roster spot. So I think that's why a guy like Tom Eshelman was probably brought back. He has options, so he can go up and down. You have Connor Green, Ashton Godot, 2 more guys that have options. They can be long relief arms. They have starter experience in the minors. They can move up and down. I think that's going to be more valuable to when Michael Elias puts his final roster together.
I'm going to say no as well, and for a lot of the reasons that Nick mentioned. I think the versatility and being able to move guys up and down over the early part of the season is really going to be crucial this year. I wanted to say that Tyler Wells would make it, but but I just don't know what to expect coming off the injury. And that's a huge question mark. I think if you had a bullpen and a rotation that you could expect to be a little bit more fixed, where you weren't going to have to move guys in and out as much, you can maybe put Wells on and see after a month or two how he looks and if he stretches out. But somehow I just don't know this is the year to do it. Even though you're probably going to be carrying more pitchers than normal, as Nick said, I think you want the ability to move guys up and down as you need to. And Wells and Sorolla don't give you that because of being Rule 5 picks.
At that point, should have kept Zach Pop.
Well, and that goes into the next question, which is, will Gray Fenter and Zach Pop stick with the teams that drafted them in the Rule 5 draft? In Gray Fenter's case, that was the Cubs. So I'll start with Nick on this one.
Yeah, I was digging around the Marlins roster last night, and they brought in like 6 new bullpen arms. No one that's really going to blow you away. No one that's really going to kind of move the needle. Yeah, no, good one. No one's going to pop for the Marlins. And so I think a guy like Zach Pop, who hasn't pitched in so long, you're probably definitely not going to want to be super aggressive with him. So I think something to watch in Marlins spring training, checking out the box scores, will be to see how many innings they give Pop. Again, they brought in 6 guys, all major league arms, proven veterans already in the major leagues. So I think there's going to be stiff competition there. No one that I think Pop couldn't compete with, but there's so many names. It's going to be hard. I think he maybe gets lost. And with Fenter, kind of the same thing. I mean, we've talked about before, especially looking back last year, I think he might have just cracked our top 30 or just missed. But, we've talked about he has that fastball curveball combination that could skyrocket him up the minor leagues and get to the major leagues, possibly as a reliever. But he hasn't pitched since 2019. And at that level, it was Delmarva. So he hasn't even made it to high A. He is older with Tommy John surgery, but it's been 2 years since he pitched, almost 2 years. Hasn't made it above high A. And you get to the Cubs, and I know the Cubs are a meh team in this terrible division, the NL Central, but their bullpen also looks pretty deep. So I think both guys end up coming back.
That would be great. Unfortunately, I think Zach Pop is going to impress enough to make the Marlins roster. It's a long season, obviously, especially when it's not 60 games, but I think he does enough to stick with Miami, unfortunately. And Gray Fenter, I think he'll be back by May. I mean, nothing against him. I think he could still be a potential good arm out of the bullpen, but it's just like you said, he hasn't pitched in a while, hasn't pitched above A ball, so that's a lot to ask for anybody, and I think he'll be back.
I'm going to go with Bob on this one. I think the Marlins hold on to Pop. We'll see how it works out once we get into the regular season, exactly how he's recovering from Tommy John. But I don't think that they would have made the move that they did, which was to actually make a trade with the Arizona Diamondbacks to get Pop after the Rule 5 draft if they didn't think he could make the roster. So I think he's going to stick with Miami, and I do think that Gray Fenter will return from the Cubs. I'll be honest, I don't really know what the Cubs are doing, but my sense is that even though they've kind of been in this cost-cutting mode, it's not a good division. There's, in theory, enough talent there, especially if Jake Arrieta shows he has something left in the tank to make a run at that division title, which could be the last time you do it with Chris Bryant and Javier Baez there. And I don't know with that they're going to want to try to rely on a pitcher with as little experience as Fenter, especially for a guy that just pitched in low A in his last full season. So I think they're still kind of in a win now mode, and that probably leads to Fenter coming back probably mid to late camp, I think. And then the Orioles will have to decide from there if they want to put him in the bullpen at high or double A and see how quickly he can move.
Yeah, I mean, we said neither of the Rule 5 guys will probably make the roster, although Tyler Wells is obviously the most intriguing. I don't think there's any risk. There was any risk in taking either of those guys, obviously. But losing Zach Pop, I know a lot of Orioles fans were kind of upset about that. He's a top 30 prospect guy, someone who, I know Bob saw as a future closer for the Orioles, and he could still be a major league closer. I think the stuff was really good, but we'll have to see, but I'm going to cross my fingers and hope they both come back.
I meant going into the 2027 season, we're going to sign him on a 3-year deal to be our closer.
All right, so Bob has another prediction question for us.
Yeah, my last question for everyone is, do you think Mike Elias is going to work his magic and either sign anyone or make a trade, any notable transactions before opening day?
I mean, the Marlins and Santander rumors, I think that's obviously done. The Marlins went out and got some corner outfielders. I know there was, this since Santander lost his arbitration case, making a little less money, he could become more attractive to teams. That could still be the case. Maybe if Diaz explodes in spring training and the Orioles can't keep him down in AAA or just don't want to, although they're going to keep him down for service time reasons. But I think if anything, it's going to be pitching. They could always use more pitching. I don't think it's going to be anything major. I don't see any trades, maybe a small trade somewhere. But, I mean, looking at the free agent list right now, there's still a lot of really good names out there. Guys like Trevor Cahill is interesting. Again, none of these guys are going to move the needle, obviously. We're talking about guys who can fill innings for the Orioles. But Trevor Cahill is interesting. You mentioned Tommy Malone is still there if the Orioles want to bring him back to grab some more international prospects from the Atlanta Braves again. Jeff Samardzija is a name that's still out there. Could be interesting. Maybe the Orioles sign another guy to a minor league deal. I think it depends on what happens early on in spring training.
I'm kind of in the same mode, I think, where it's going to depend on what happens early in camp. In theory, they have brought in enough pitchers over the last 3 weeks or so that they shouldn't have to make another move, but we just don't know that it's going to work out that way. But I think that if they do, it's going to be kind of a, low risk, high reward type signing to see what a guy like a Trevor Cahill could do if you were to bring him in. I don't really see any major moves, and I would be surprised if we saw trade, especially a player the caliber of Santander going. So I guess my answer to this question is no.
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be any, at least major trade that is really notable. I think a lot of the free agency stuff, it's going to rely on those Rule 5 picks. I think if they quickly realize that they're neither are going to make it and they return them to their clubs very soon in like a week or two, then maybe you see them sign a Tommy Malone or someone comparable that's just looking to get a job at this point. And I know John Becker on Twitter, he works on Roster Resources. He's a good follow. He has the Orioles predicted sign Trevor Cahill, and that could definitely be a guy that, you stick in the back end of your bullpen. I hope you get some value and flip him at the deadline. So that would be interesting. I don't think there's going to be anything too major, but like I said, there might be a small signing, especially if they return the Rule 5 guys.
Nick Markakis is still out there. Yasiel Puig is still out there.
Yeah, we need more outfielders for sure.
No, they're not coming. They're not coming to Baltimore.
No.
All right, so here's the last question that I have, at least on our list. I wouldn't be shocked if we come up with one or two more before the show ends. Will Adley Rutschman be assigned to Norfolk out of camp? So keep in mind what we talked about earlier on the show. AAA will be starting a month earlier than AA this year. So I will start with Nick on this one.
It's an interesting one. I know a lot of Orioles fans are going to be paying close attention to that, but I don't think he starts the year in Norfolk. I think on one hand, starting in Norfolk would be a great idea just because we've mentioned before on our show plenty of times that rotation is going to have five guys who are all top 30 prospects, most likely in the Orioles system, with a really good bullpen. Guys like Cody Sedlock are going to be there in that bullpen, most likely. And having Adley Rutschman there would be a huge help, obviously. And they're starting on time, so you get him into games immediately. But at the same time, I think he's on the camp reserve roster. So I think that kind of signals that he's going to start the year in Bowie. I think that's where a lot of the talk has been already. But you put him in Bowie, he gets to work with those guys. I don't know. DL Hall probably starts in Bowie. So he's working with DL Hall. I don't know if Grayson Rodriguez reaches Bowie very early on in the year, maybe by the end of the year. But Bowie's still going to have a really good pitching staff to work with. And there, if he rakes for a month at Bowie, you can move him up in June or July, get to Norfolk, play 2 months there, and then maybe we see him in the big leagues at the very end of the year. But I know casual fans are going to be screaming for his name all year long, but I'm perfectly fine with having him just sit in the minor leagues and work with those guys. There's so many pitchers down there in the minor leagues, and I think having Rutschman there behind the plate working with him every single day is going to be a huge bonus. And then we can roll in 2022 with all these guys.
Yeah, it's something I hadn't even really considered until I listened to Nick on the Chris Sterner show or BSL Tonight, one of those two. And it kind of makes a lot of sense that he could start at AAA. And at that point, you're a hot month or two away from the majors at any point in time. So that tells me they're probably not going to do that. But God, that is enticing. And yeah, he'll definitely be the Ryan Mountcastle of 2021, just like last year. Mountcastle was clamored for pretty much. I mean, it was only a month until he came up, but it felt like forever. And yeah, I think the earliest we'll see him in September. But if they do start him at AAA, then maybe that's a sign that they'll bring him up a little bit quicker than maybe we thought.
My guess is that Rutzman does start in Bowie this year. I do think that given the circumstances with AAA starting early, there's a strong argument for putting him there. The problem is that I don't see the Orioles starting him at Norfolk and then putting him down in Bowie. So at that point, if they're putting him in Norfolk, they're committing to it. They have Nick Sufo in the system right now. They have Brett Cumberland, who I think they're pretty high on, and there's actually a good piece in the Baltimore Sun that John Mioli wrote about Brett Cumberland that I read this morning. And I'd encourage anyone who has not read it yet to go check that out. It talks about how Cumberland has been working on a swing since the shutdown last year. So I think that Cumberland's going to be a guy they're going to want to give regular playing time to in Norfolk. If Nick Sufo is around, he's got a lot of upside to defense he can bring. Austin Wynn is still in the organization at this point. And I think that they're going to go ahead and they'll start Rutzman and Bowie, let him work with DL Hall. And some of the other prospects will be there, and maybe we see him in Norfolk around July 1st.
Could see that too.
Yeah, I mean, I know Orioles fans don't want to be patient anymore. I get it. I'm tired of being patient as well. But, I mean, he's coming. And I know Baseball America even put out a piece earlier today, the top 40 prospects of the last 40 years. And Adley Rutschman was on that list. I think if I can pull it up here again real quick, but just to show kind of and it was guys like Jim Callis and two other guys, I can't remember off the top of my head, that put this list together. But I mean, they had Ben McDonald, 25th prospect of all time. Last 40 years. Matt Wieters at 28, and Adley Rutschman came in at number 36. Jose Canseco is 35, and Felix Hernandez was 37, sandwiched around Adley Rutschman, but he's going to be in Baltimore very, very soon.
I thought everyone said that Rutschman was a better catching prospect than Wieters, but I guess that's hindsight.
Maybe he's a bust. I don't know.
Well, hopefully wherever Rutzman goes, we see the really positive results come through, and I'm sure they will. So do either of you have any impromptu predictions that you want to throw out here?
Yeah, I thought of one, pretty good one here. Will either one of these three things happen in 2021? Will we see a Dustin Knight backflip, a Mickey Janus knuckleball, or a Ripken taking at bat again at Camden Yards in 2021?
Definitely no backflip. I can't see Dustin Knight making the team, and I especially can't see him finishing a game because I did hear that that's the only time he'll do it is when he closes a game out. That seems highly unlikely. Ryan Ripken, look, it would be an awesome story. I don't see it happening, at least this year, if ever. So my most likely candidate is Mickey Janus, Josh Soroka. Eat your heart out. Enjoy it. You might see a couple of his pitches this year at some point.
Yeah, of the three, I think that's the most likely is that we see Mickey Janus. I would love to see Dustin Knight do a backflip on the mound of Camden Yards sometime in August or September, but I don't know that I see that happening. And Ryan Ripken, as Bob said, it would be a really nice story, but I don't know that I see it happening, especially at that position at first base, because the Orioles do have so many options in front of Ripken that I think even if he exceeded expectations, whatever level he went to, it would be hard to fit him on the roster, even for a limited time period. So I'm going to say no to Ripken being on the roster, and I do think we see Mickey Janus at some point.
It would be great to see that curveball. Yeah, and it would have been cool. I remember maybe 2 years ago, it'd be a more interesting conversation. Would we see Ryan Ripken and Preston Palmeiro in the big leagues? And Preston Palmeiro is, I think, out of baseball now, and Ryan Ripken he's hanging around because of that name. Let's be honest. The numbers are pretty dismal, but something fun to watch during spring training, I guess.
The only thing I could think of is, will the Orioles still be the major league punching bag for the national media by the end of spring training? I think we all know the answer to that.
Yes, but they shouldn't be because what were you expecting? This is pretty much who the Orioles are right now. And I do think that there are going to be some teams that finish with the worst record in 2021. So, yeah, they'll still be a punching bag. They'll probably be a punching bag for most of the year, even if, as I said, everybody knows who they are. And I think in the end, they're not going to have deserved to be the punching bags they are right now. They'll still be a punching bag at the end of camp.
Yeah, I mean it's
just
easy.
Toughen us up.
Yeah, it's just easy pickings for the national media. I mean, I'd rather watch these Orioles on a nightly basis than the Pirates. Can anybody name more than 3 players on the Pirates roster? Probably not. I can only because I'm looking at their roster right now. The Rockies made probably one of the worst trades in the history of baseball. I mean, I don't think Austin Gomber is going to do anything at Coors Field for them while Nolan Arenado wins the division by himself. So, yeah, it is what it is. That's all right. We'll have the last laugh. It's all good.
All right, I'll throw this out there. What's the one position out of the position players where we might be the most surprised by who the starter is on opening day?
Third base. I think there is a real chance that Rio Ruiz, God, I understand like Scott Garceau there for a second. I think there's a real chance that Ruiz could just continue to disappoint like he did last year. And, I'm kind of two minds with him. He had such a low BABIP. He had a good hard hit rate. I think one of the highest on the team, but I don't know. It doesn't pass the eye test for me exactly. So I think if he bombs out and doesn't make the team, then maybe you get Bannon or Jahmai Jones or Yolmer Sanchez. So I think that could be the one.
Yeah, I think that's a really good guess. I guess the only other thing I could think of that could shock us would be Cesar Valdez making starting rotation. Even though I don't want him there. I think a lot of other people would probably agree. I like putting him in the closer's role for right now. I think Matt Harvey is I don't know what to think about Matt Harvey anymore. We talked about him on our show. Wish him all the best, but it's been so long at this point. But with Valdez, he can go 5 outs. He can even get you the last 6 outs if you really need him to. So, but I don't know. A lot of this talk about going in the starting rotation. We'll have to see.
I'm going to go with Bob. I think if there's a position that could change from what our expectations are now to opening day, it's going to be third base. Because I think if Rio Ruiz struggles in camp, he may end up playing his way into a platoon role or not being on the roster at all, which I think is probably the less likely outcome. But I wouldn't be entirely shocked if the Orioles, for the first month or two of the season, go with a platoon at third of Pat Valaika and Rio Ruiz, and that Pat Valaika is the starting third baseman on opening day for that reason. So I have one more question here, and it's kind of based off of what Nick said. Will the Orioles have a set closer at the end of camp, or are they going to go by committee? If they do have a set closer, who will it be?
I think it'll probably be a committee, but I think Tanner Scott will be like the leader of that committee, get the most opportunities out of all of them. But I think it might be between Hunter Harvey, Tanner Scott, and our boy with the dead fish, Cesar Valdez.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a committee at this point, but you probably definitely see Tanner Scott. If it's a super high leverage situation, you need these last 2 outs, runners on base. I'm probably going to put Tanner Scott in there to see what he can do. I wouldn't mind seeing the Orioles really challenge him, putting him in those really tough situations this year, and let's see just how good he is. The improvements last year were phenomenal. I think our patience with Tanner Scott kind of paid off last year, but I want to see him challenged a lot this year, see what he can do. Still young, only 26 years old.
I think it's going to be split between Tanner Scott and Cesar Valdez, and Valdez might be the next test for Mike Elias in can you get the most out of a half season for a pitcher in terms of trade value. If Valdez pitches well is pitching well going into the All-Star break. I think he's probably going to be a guy that's moved at the deadline. At that point, Tanner Scott takes over the role permanently. But I think that they'll split the duties between those two early on, with Valdez maybe getting more opportunities, at least initially. So it's something of a committee, but definitely set on Valdez and Scott.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable. And God, Valdez, if he really lights it up in the first half, he could be pretty valuable with his service time, plenty of team control, and I don't know, with his age and not so assured long-term success, maybe not, but it would be interesting.
Maybe it's Zach Bupp.
Yeah.
And you never know. So any final predictions or prediction?
I got nothing else. Do we think we'll be able to watch any of the spring training games next week? And probably not on Masson, but on a road network on MLB TV. I'm hoping.
I think I did look. I think the Yankees, they play the Yankees Monday or Tuesday, maybe. I think that's on the Yes Network. So buy your MLB TV package, I guess.
Yeah. So have to rely on that for now, at least.
Go old school with the radio. Is it going to be on radio?
Don't know. Probably not.
Jeez Louise.
Well, your Baltimore Orioles, if you can see them, if you can hear them, great. Then that's going to be our spring training until further notice. So this has been our latest episode of On the Verge. We took a look at spring training predictions as well as a quick discussion on the 2021 minor league season. Be sure to visit BaltimoreSportsAndLife.com. Check out the articles there. Hop on the message board and join in the discussion. I had a piece up over the weekend looking at Bruce Zimmerman, Alexander Wells, and Zach Lothar and how they could help the team in 2021. Bob and Nick, do either of you have new stories coming up soon?
I'm holding off for the regular season to start when I can start doing my 3-up, 3-down pieces for majors and minors.
Yeah, probably a review of the infield, or preview of the infield. I looked at the starting rotation and the bullpen already over there. You can check those out. But I'll do the infield and outfield probably over the next 2 weeks. But really, it's college baseball right now. That's what I've been focusing on.
Well, it's certainly going to be exciting to see college baseball this spring as well as Orioles spring training. Thank you for listening to On the Verge tonight. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to On the Verge.